You guys hear me? Give me a little arm raise if you can hear me. Sweet.
Hey,
Let's
fool.
see. Who else? What's up, Ryan? How's it going?
Pretty good. How are you?
Oh, fantastic.
Good.
It was actually in the 50s today in St. Louis, so got out there. I'm adding Walk of Fire as a co-host too. Should be fun.
50s are
So,
good.
yeah, so got out there outside at least and got to get some exercise outdoors instead of the freezing crap we've had recently. Walker, you in? Walk of Fire?
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening. Great evening, in my opinion. It's hump day. That means we're halfway to the week, and then we get to celebrate Martin Luther King Jr.'s. Is it his birthday or something on Monday? I don't even know. I'm assuming that's when his birthday was. Around this time or something.
Sure. We'll allow it.
All right, I'm just going to let some people get in here first. Before we start digging in, what you guys been up to? Hey, Angie. She laughed. Sean Dunn in here. What's up, Sean? Sean, you want to be a speaker to start it off? Ow. Oh, he's fine. I know Steve said he was trying to work this app to get Spaces to work, so hopefully he can chime in. He knows this stuff pretty well. How many people we got in here? 20? I'd like to start once we get maybe like 30 or 40 or some more people.
Should be there in a second.
I kind of want a speaker that maybe doesn't know this stuff as well as us, so they can be like, can you just hold on for a second? I heard a Russian name and I don't really, can you, because this is going to get confusing in my opinion. Because they're going to be like saying a bunch of Russian names that might sound the same or something like that.
Yeah, I hope everyone did all their homework that Fool posted earlier.
Yeah, did you guys do all your homework? If not, you got to go away and read my timeline and do all your homework. There's about 50 documents I posted. I want you to read all of those, and you can come back in the Spaces. Fantastic. Ryan, did you get a read up on any of this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sweet.
I won't pretend to know it as well as you, but I tried to do my homework.
Yeah, I know Walk of Fire was saying that he didn't get to do his prep at all, and I was like, I kind of crammed a little bit, but should be fine. Should be fun.
I
What's up,
find if
Envy?
I can start a sentence and then if I just let my voice trail off a little bit, it sounds like I have an idea, and then I'll just let you pick up.
Sick. Okay, we can do that. All right, Ryan's in here. The other Ryan. Van Sickle. Any of you guys want to speak? MB, do you want to be a speaker? I want somebody to be like, can you go over that again? I didn't get that. DIY's in here. Dope. I hope a lot of those, the same crew that was here Sunday night come in. Hey, Ryan. Here, I'm going to invite you to speak. All right, Sawhill's already requested. I don't know who that person is. Let me see who this is. Die Horten Biblioteca. I don't know. All right. Maybe this is enough to already get started. Maybe I should lay some ground rules first. But I would like to lay the ground rules when a bunch of people are in here, but this is probably enough. Whatever. First ground rule is I don't like if you want to ask the question like, is there any evidence that the Russians actually did hack the DNC? That's not what this is going to be about, and we've talked about that like many times. So I don't really feel like I don't really want that in discussion. Um, if you have a question sort of on the similar lines, that's fine. But like, it's more about like the intelligence backing the Mueller indictments and stuff like that. And the other one is if you're asking questions that are clearly in bad faith, I'm going to kick you out or fuck you up. And those are basically the two rules. Ask questions in good faith, which I think some of them the other night were not in good faith, and that's why I was pissed off. And then this is about intelligence backing Mueller indictments and stuff like that, and kind of putting all these Russian-related intelligence groups together. It's not about did the Russians hack the DNC or whatever. I mean, that's obviously part of it, but that question, like, just we don't need to discuss that question because it's been asked so many times. Let's just act like that happened. Is that all right? Is that a good rule, Ryan Walkafire?
Absolutely.
I think it's a great rule.
Okay.
Just let's try and keep everything as focused to the I would say the subject line of this spaces, but it's a rather sprawling one.
Yeah.
But especially now that we're able to record these and hopefully get the information that we want to get out there and be able to have these discussions, letting these things get off the rails and go on to different subjects just can get a little hairy, put it that way.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, go ahead, Walkafire.
I was gonna say go ahead, fool.
Oh, thank you so much. And Gucci 2 Henry's in here as a speaker. This is gonna be good. He's on top of this shit because we talk about it a lot. And the other thing is, so those are 2 rules. Mansour missed it, so he's probably going to come in and break the rules. No, he's not. He won't do it. Julie's in here. Nice. And the other thing is, so we're doing this mainly because a lot of people were DMing me and asking the question. A couple events happened like last week. And they're asking me like, who are all these Russians? I can't keep it together, blah, blah, blah. So this is going to be like a tour de force of all these Russian related intelligence people. And the main reason is that, we've been researching, the Mueller case for a long time, and the old NetTick show indictment where all the 12 GRU agents were indicted. And basically that indictment isn't as thorough as many of the cyber related indictments I've seen, but also there isn't they don't ever say where this intelligence came from, which I've asked so many journalists about this, because where did this intelligence actually come from about these hackers? And starting back in maybe 2018 or something, like early 2018, there's a couple Volkswagen or just one Volkswagen article about maybe related to the AIVD, the Dutch intelligence that might have provided this. Then there's also articles about that FSB agents might have provided this to us. It's never been clear if our intelligence agencies actually provided this intelligence. Did they actually did the work to say oh, we're attributing this to GRU and these 12 Russians. So it's never quite clear where these GRU agents names came from and all this other stuff. Secondarily, I was going to say, I've asked so many reporters, I'm like, this is what I want to know. Where did this indictment come from? And someone would be like, well, we think it came from Dutch. We think it, and then some other people were just like, it's foreign intelligence. And some other people were like, it came from NSA, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to invite Steve to speak. So that's kind of the theme. So we'll start it off in September 2021, this guy, Ilya Sachkov, was arrested by the Russian government for treason. And Sachkov was the CEO and president founder of a Russian cybersecurity company called Group IB. And I was somewhat familiar with this company because we'll kind of get into it, but there is some relatedness to the Steele dossier. And I guess a year before that, I had a source that I was talking to, and he there's a thread that if you go into my homework assignments or whatever I said today, there's a thread called the Fool dossier, and that came from this guy that emailed me a bunch of this information, and Sachkov was mentioned in it, and he was basically saying that he was working with the FSB. And Sergei Mikhailov, who was at the time a colonel in the FSB, and he was kind of the head in charge of the cyber operations at the FSB. And he was in charge of a couple of Russians that were sort of notable in early 2017. A couple of FSB officers named Dmitry Dokuchayev and Igor Sushkin, and they were indicted for the Yahoo hack, and that was in early 2017. And then Mikhailov in like late 2016 was arrested for treason in Russia. So back to the Fool dossier. So he was mentioning Sachkov was related to Mikhailov and the FSB and other people. So I thought that was interesting. So when it popped up in September, Sachkov was arrested for treason. That kind of caught my eye. I think caught many of our eyes that had seen that stuff before, like Steve and Walk of Fire. So we're like, oh, that's interesting. And the other thing is, I don't know, Walk of Fire, if you just want to go quickly through what Sachkov's relationship to the Steele dossier or Group IB's relationship to the Steele dossier is.
Sure, yeah. So there's one report in the Steele dossier, I believe it's 86.
Yep.
That kind of it's its own separate report. It's the one that did have the date of July of 2015. I personally think that that's just a typo. Steele says it's a typo. It doesn't really make sense for it to not be a typo, but I know I've seen some people tweet about it and say, oh, look, this was prepared a year before. But it talks a lot about different cyber operations that the Russians are doing. And at one point, it mentions a couple of different organized crime groups, cybercrime. And if you cross-reference that report with Group IB, they did an annual report every year about I think it's high tech trends, cyber trends, or something like that, where they go through and they prepare a report for the public to say, here's what's going on in cybercrime world. And it just seems interesting how it seems to line up with exactly what the Steele report is talking about. The same three groups, and Nunak, Booktrap, and Mattel. And here, let me see if I can figure out how to share a tweet in here. Does anyone know how to do that?
No idea.
I don't know.
But if you
I've
can
got
like retweet it at the top of your page or something like that, or maybe I can find it.
Let's see.
But basically, those three groups or whatever you're talking about, Booktrap and those other things, that Group IB were the main entity that gave reports about those groups, is how I understand it.
Correct. That's what it seems to be. Here we go. Let me retweet this.
All right, so Walk of Fire is retweeting it. So basically, and the cool thing about, I don't know about cool, but the interesting thing about 86 is Steele claims that that's the only report he was tasked by the FBI, which is after he met with Gaeta in Rome or London. Where did he meet him? London, Rome, London, one of those places. So he was tasked by the FBI. Then he got a report basically that included Group IB stuff.
Correct.
Right,
Correct.
Fire?
You know, I mean, it appears to be that way.
Got it. Cool. So then, just going back to the Fool dossier real quickly, my source said that he thinks Sachkov had met with or people around Sachkov had met with Steele or some of his sources, and that's what the Fool dossier said. So around that time, which I think incidentally, the day that I released the Fool dossier, the Danchenko electronic communication came out. Just randomly, that happened on the same day. It was kind of weird. But so Sachkov was, again, the CEO of Group IB. And then, so I didn't pay attention to that too much until last week. An article came out in Bloomberg that was saying that there's this other Russian named Vladimir Klyushin, and he was indicted and arrested like in the U.S. like in March or he was arrested in Switzerland, then is going to be extradited from Switzerland, and he was arrested in March. And this guy was the head of like a cybersecurity firm called M13, and one of his employees happened to be Yermakov. What's his first name? Ivan? Is that right? Yermakov?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Ivan Yermakov. So he was an employee of Klyushin. and he was indicted along with him. And supposedly he was a GRU officer, and he was included in the Netishko Mueller indictment, and he was one of the 12 GRU agents and one of the main hackers involved in that operation, they claim. So apparently Yermakov was also working for M13, if he was working for GRU at all, which I really haven't seen any evidence that he was working for GRU, but that's what Mueller says. But in that article last week, it was saying that supposedly that Sachkov was one of the people that turned Klyushin in and was informing Western intelligence about him. But but in that article, it was said that that I hadn't seen before that well, first of all, that Klyushin might be able to provide more intelligence about the Russian hacking operation that happened in 2016, but also that other Russians were involved, like Ilya Sachkov, in informing the U.S. intelligence agencies about who hacked the DNC. So I clicked on another article, and it was saying that about Sachkov, and it's saying that that a bunch of sources were saying, and obviously it's a news article, so we don't know if this is true or not. I feel like I shouldn't have to say that, but some people on the internet feel like I do. That Sachkov might be the source for the 12 GRU agents to the U.S. government, and he's been cooperating with the U.S. government, so that's why he was arrested for treason. That he was a source for that intelligence. So that's one of that really struck, which I missed that. I guess it was in December too, that came out, that he was potentially the source for the intelligence that went into the Mueller, along with Sergei Mikhailov, who we talked about before. So, but also in that article, it says another reason that he could have been arrested for treason was something related to 2014, and that's in the Bloomberg article. And now we're going to get into what that 2014 incident was, which many people don't really have not probably seen this part of it. But in 2014, one of Sachkov's employees named Nikita Kizlitsyn was indicted. And at that time, it was sealed. Nobody knew about it. And his indictment didn't come out maybe till 2020, something like that. So this Nikita Kizlitsyn was an employee of Sachkov, but before that, in Group IB, he works for Group IB still. And if you go to the full dossiers, Kizlitsyn's mentioned a lot in there. But so after he was indicted, some FBI agents showed up in Russia, in the embassy, I believe, and they started. And Kizlitsyn decided he wanted to cooperate, right? So he went to and met with some of the FBI agents. He's basically like, I can't be arrested. That's not an option. I'll cooperate with you guys. So if you read a 302, I think it's the second post under, or it might be the first post where I said my assignments today. But under there, it says, this is what happened in 2014. He starts saying that he wants to cooperate basically with the FBI. And he also says in that 302 that he's doing this with the full confidence and permission of Ilya Sachkov, who's the CEO of Group IB. So in this 302, he basically gives up a bunch of hackers related to things that happened in 2016. So he gives up Yevgeny Nikulin, which we'll talk about later. I'll probably lean on Walk of Fire for that. But he's one of the Russians who was indicted or was extradited in 2015 from the Czech Republic. Oh, sweet. We have Steven here. And he's one of the co-conspirators that actually was actually in the Kizlitsyn indictment, which I was talking about earlier. So which the Kizlitsyn indictment actually turns into the same exact indictment for Yevgeny Nikulin. And that's basically a hack of FormSpring, LinkedIn, and some other stuff. So, but back to the 302, Kizlitsyn's basically like, I worked with Alexei Belin, another guy we'll talk about probably. I worked with Yevgeny Nikulin for this hack. And I worked with this other guy's Rise, which is Mehmet Sozin, for this hack. But he also goes, I used to work for this magazine. It was called Hacker Magazine in Russia. And I hired Alexei Belin to write for that as a hacker. Then I also hired another hacker named Forb, who was actually Dmitry Dokuchayev, who was another Russian, who I already mentioned before, who was working for the FSB underneath Sergei Mikhailov. and he was friends with these two guys, um, Kislitsin, Nikulin, Alexei Bellin, and Dokuchayev. That's when they kind of met, and Dokuchayev started working with Alexei Bellin, and that's kind of what led into the Yahoo hack and stuff like that. So basically, Kislitsin in 2014 dimed on Nikulin, Alexei Bellin, Dokuchayev, um, Rice, and a bunch of other guys in that indictment. Oleg Tolstik, and some other hackers. But the point of that is that that's kind of when potentially that Sachkov and Group IB really started working with FBI. Sachkov gave Kislitsin his blessing, and that's basically the event in 2014 that could be the other thing that led to the treason account. And when that 302 came out, because if you went back to like the Nikulin indictment, they relied on like some confidential sources, and that was Kislitsin. So I was kind of surprised when, like 4 years, they actually released that 302 and named Kislitsin. So that's when kind of Group IB came on the map, and I started sort of researching it and reaching out to other people to know it, and then eventually Sachkov got indicted for treason. But um, but going on to 2016, Nikulin was unsealed like in October or something like that, and it's basically the exact same indictment. And after Nikulin was arrested, it went forward, and there was a couple FBI agents that basically wanted to get Nikulin to confess to the DNC hack, but obviously he was like no. And maybe Walk of Fire if you want to talk more about this one, and then we can get and move on after that, because I guess that's October 2016 when I think Nikulin was indicted or extradited or something like that.
Yeah. I'll give what I can on Nikulin. I was pretty obsessed with him for a little while there, and then everything slowed down with his case and everything. Just checking in on everyone. Is everyone got everything
that's
down 100%? Y'all ready for the pop quiz?
Yeah, that's the other thing. Like that's probably kind of confusing, but it's probably going to be necessary to know when we go forward. Brian, anything?
No, I don't think so.
All right, because I'm not sure how it's going to naturally flow from here, but this is where we're at. So Nikulin, Walk of
Yeah,
Fire.
that's the issue with all these different hackers and organizations, and Russian GRU versus FSB and the hackers, and what are they doing? It's really hard to keep straight in your head, and I think a lot of that is by design. The intelligence community knows how to keep shiny objects in front of us and try and push the actual important things to the background. And so it's hard to get really good information on some of these guys, especially a lot of the articles and open source information that you can find on them is going to be in Russian, and that's its own research issue there. You got to figure out how to translate the pages and do your searches right. But
I will say one thing, like so a lot of this is going to get into this sort of like idea there was competition between the FSB and the GRU, basically. So you can kind of start grouping your people into FSB and GRU. So you can say like, okay, right now you have in FSB, you have Mikhailov, Dokuchayev, Alexei Bellin, Sachkov, Kislitsin, Sushkin, and then maybe in GRU you might have Yermakov, Kliushin, other people, right? And then we might start boxing people, and then obviously at some point some of these guys are going to potentially start turning on each other, or at least related to news reports.
Yeah. So, and I'm going to try and start at the very beginning. A very good place to start. Well, not the very beginning, but we'll start with Nikulin. Nikulin, he was I want to say late 20s, maybe early. No, I think he was probably mid to late 20s. Basically a kid that was in 2012 or around thereabouts. He ended up hacking like Fool said, LinkedIn, FormSpring, which I believe is some sort of social networking type site. I think Dropbox, and maybe a couple other ones. And he figured out how to get lots of usernames, passwords, and then he would basically sell them online and make his money that way. And he was this big, flashy guy. He drove his, crazy cars, had lots of expensive jewelry. And then in October, it was October 3rd or 4th, I believe, he starts making his way to Prague for some reason. It's not quite clear. I heard at one point there was some sort of hacker convention going on, but I never found that again, so I'm not sure where I came up with that. But he goes to Prague, and the FBI basically, I mean, I think they put out an Interpol red notice, and they snag him while he's outside of Russia. It's kind of weird. It's for a hack or some hacks that took place 4 years prior, but they grab him, and then they end up fighting for a couple years to get him extradited to the U.S. Meanwhile, Russia's trying to get him extradited because he's in the Czech Republic back over to Russia, which is also kind of strange. He seems like a kind of a low level hacker. Yes, he makes some big hacks, but he's not some huge intelligence source, or so it seems. And yet, both countries were fighting over him for a couple years.
Well, one thing about Nikulin is apparently he was friends with a lot of oligarchs. Sons and daughters or something like that, children.
Yeah. He's had on his social media a bunch of pictures with kids of oligarchs and such. Like, that's a good point. And so there's all sorts of theories and questions about what did he actually know, and how plugged in was he. What's interesting is I'm trying to make sure I get the facts correct, but the FormSpring hack, a lot of people on the left or just in conspiracy land made the connection. They said, well, they think that Anthony Weiner used FormSpring, and they think that's how Nikulin has actually got in and got his password, and then the FBI got that, and that's how Weiner's laptop started getting investigated by the FBI right there at the end of the election, and that's where they found Hillary's emails and all sorts of stuff there. So there's that whole side possibility, but they end up grabbing him, and there's a lot of weird stories that came out. They kept his name sealed for a couple weeks, and it wasn't until maybe late October that it gets unsealed and his name gets revealed. There was even an IG report about a top-level FBI supervisor that leaked his name to the press. I'm trying to remember which guy that was, what his name was. Pargman or something.
Yeah, Parman. Yep.
Parman. So it's interesting that he seems to be making lots of waves within the FBI, and especially higher ups, for something that seems small. And I see, we have Hal Martin here in the subject, so I'll throw this in real quick. It's interesting that Nikulin is getting snagged at the same time that Hal Martin is getting snagged over here in the U.S. But once Nikulin gets extradited,
well,
here,
even more than that, I mean, we have like this semi hypothesis. I mean, it's not like a great one, or maybe it is. But I guess the Hal Martin case wasn't unsealed until after Nikulin was nabbed up, right? Arrested, right?
Exactly.
And the thing,
actually.
Yeah. So, and the thing about the Hal Martin case is that he was at the day the Shadow Broker stuff started coming out, he started DMing Kaspersky researchers and saying he wants to talk to Yevgeny, right? And everybody thinks that Yevgeny is Yevgeny Kaspersky, Eugene Kaspersky, but some of us started thinking, well, mainly Walk of Fire, started thinking that Yevgeny was actually Yevgeny Nikulin. He wants to speak to Yevgeny. Then I know at some point the Kaspersky researchers turned Hal into the NSA, and Hal was arrested October 5th or something like that. Maybe.
Actually, back in late August, but
Okay, late August, and then later Nikulin was arrested in Prague, which the day that the Hal Martin case was unsealed, right?
right.
Okay. Yeah. So the idea out there is, and if you ever like in the assignment I already put out in that thread, I put out Hal's notes or his letter basically, and they're really interesting if you haven't read it. Maybe he's confessing to something, maybe he's not, but it's interesting that he used the name Yevgeny, and it's not quite clear if it's Kaspersky or Nikulin. Maybe we'll never know.
Yeah,
but you can go on now.
Hopefully, we'll know one day, but who knows? It's fun to speculate. Let's see. Okay, so he gets pulled over here in 2018, and they start moving forward with his case, and eventually in there, like Fool touched on, is when part of the one of the filings in the case right before it goes to trial is this 302 from Kislitzin from 2014, because Nikulin's trying to argue, oh, you can't prove it was me just because it was from my IP address and all this sort of stuff. It was pretty clearly him. And so the government files this 302 and says, see, look, here's where Kislitzin said that he worked with Nikulin, and here's where he said that he was doing this, and he even mentions Alexei Belin, who is another hacker that also would work with Nikulin as well. And so that's where Kislitzin comes in. And starts to bring in Sakov and all these other big players. So moving forward real quick from Nikulin, that's in October of 2016. Like you mentioned, Fool, in December is when Russia arrests a few of these people, Mikhailov, Dokuchev, some of these FSB guys. And it's not clear why. It's not clear what they're insinuating other than just treason. No other information comes out, and it's all very weird. Everyone's still all up in arms because Trump won. So it's not that it floated under the radar, but there just wasn't much to do with it when you heard that news. Then you move forward to March 2017, a couple months later, and that is when the Justice Department indicts Dokuchayev, Mikhailov, Alexei Belin, who I just mentioned earlier, associated with Nikulin, and
well, he does. The thing is, they don't indict Mikhailov. Steve, are you trying to test your mic?
Well,
okay, cool.
Yeah, I was. Sorry, I missed most of it because I spent about 25 minutes trying to get the Android emulator working.
Sweet. Well, we can hear you.
Oh, that's great. Okay. Yeah, just one thing about Belin was also specifically named in the December 29th Obama sanctions.
Oh, yep. Good point. So this March 2017.
We'll come back to that, by the way, Steve. Don't let me forget that.
Yeah.
They indict these FSB guys, and just a real quick summary for those of you who haven't read that indictment or aren't aware of it. They were what's called mining cookies. Basically, they were able to get into the very, very back end of Yahoo, more or less, and they could pull basically anyone's account they wanted. It seems like so. Yeah, when they say that, I think it was 500 million accounts have been hacked. Well, it's not that they stole a password list from 500 accounts. It's that they could just go in and tell the back end that they are inputting the correct password and get access. So it's that 500 million accounts were compromised, not that 500 million accounts had their password stolen. And Bellin is used by Dokuchayev. He's this FSB guy who would task him with, hey, go hack into a Gmail account, or go hack into this real quick, and send me those username and passwords. And there's some interesting information in that indictment. I don't have it in front of me, so I'm not going to dive in too much about it, but it talks a little bit about some of the different individuals that had their emails compromised, but it's all just vague descriptions. A banker from a country bordering Russia or something similar to that. So it's not clear exactly who they're trying to say that they were hacking into, but lots of times they'll throw in some examples into the indictment in order to really nail them for what they were hacking.
Well, it's interesting. Well, some of them were like an advisor to the deputy prime minister of Russia. So some of them were clearly interior people, and then like if you can speculate that it could be an advisor. One of the deputy prime minister of Russia was like Arkady Dvorkovich, who we know that his emails were leaked by Humpty Dumpty, which apparently, or Shaltai Boltai, or Anonymous International, who apparently was run by Dokuchayev, or that's what people say, because some of their leaders were arrested for treason in Russia as well. But that's another thing that I'm like, hey guys, go look at the Dokuchayev indictment and try to figure out who those people they were hacking. By the way,
now, one comment about these various ordinary indictments is that there's lots of detail in it, so that when you read them and then I don't know whether you mentioned this before, but if you read that and then compare it to the Mueller indictment is really sparse on detail. I mean, when we're dealing with guys like Nikulin or these other guys, they have IP addresses, email exchanges, domain names, and the Mueller indictment on DNC is, in comparison, arm waving.
Yep. So that's part of like why we're doing this, is because like there's clear intelligence that was backing the Mueller indictment, but that indictment wasn't as clear as, like you're saying, the Dokuchayev one.
Yeah, it's very odd. We'll put it that way. Ryan, you look like you're trying to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in a little bit because there's so many different reports out there, and it's not hard to get confused when you're starting to look at all these different characters. But as it relates to Nikulin and sort of the tie-in to the larger story, there's a couple of reports that are out there, and one is that he was approached by a U.S. attorney from the Department of Justice. This is what his lawyer alleged. And in exchange for admitting that he was participating in the DNC hack, they offered him, cash and an apartment and all these different things. And obviously he didn't take that. And that's just an allegation. We don't know the truth of that because there's so much that we don't know, to Steve's point, because Mueller didn't share so many of these details with us. It's really, really sparse, and we're kind of left to try to decipher public reporting and what's the truth and what's disinformation or what's true. And I think the other report that I draw attention to is that there is a report out there that his arrest and his prosecution was the result of information from Sergei Mikhailov. And Mikhailov is, I think we're going to talk about him in a few minutes, he's central to so many of these different cases as somebody that's providing intelligence. And, I think we'll talk about him in a few minutes, but he seems to be in a lot of these different stories as a source of information.
Yeah, and I was going to say, well, Mikhailov seems to me to like the kind of the guy who's running a lot of these operations, and I'm not sure if Dokuchayev or any of those guys were going rogue, but like if you go to the Dokuchayev indictment, there's somebody that's a co-conspirator that's listed as FSB Agent 3, who was Dokuchayev and Sushchin's supervisor, and they just list him as FSB Agent 3, and it's clearly Sergei Mikhailov, and you wonder why he wasn't indicted along with him. So, I mean, it's clear that... Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Some of the Russian stories on the Mikhailov arrest were pretty colorful. I mean,
Yep.
Apparently they found something like $5 million in cash in his house, or at least they said they did. And then the other story that I recall from the time was that his birth certificate didn't seem to match anything. So it wasn't even clear who Mikhailov was in the end. So we start getting into it, and then the other, where some of the Russian commentary at the time was going into it, sort of making it into a hall of mirrors, is that if there were some suggestions that it was actually the FSB crowd that were hacking the DNC, not the GRU, and that the FSB was being run by Mikhailov, who was a traitor and probably working for Brennan. So that the whole thing ended up being a series of mirrors back and forth, where you have no idea who's doing what to whom in the end, and no real way of forming an opinion.
Yeah, we'll get back to that about Golden Pegasus, but Gucci.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Steve said about the Hall of Mirrors and Mikhailov's relevance to the possibility that there was a notable FSB involvement in the hacks. One of the first articles published, it was January 25th, 2017, by the New York Times about these arrests, and like the second paragraph, and granted, it's important to be a bit skeptical when things like this leak, but it reads, a senior intelligence official in the Russian Cyber Intelligence Department that American officials say oversaw last year's election hacking has been arrested in Moscow on charges of treason. And they're talking about Mikhailov there. And it's interesting that when the sort of consensus was arrived in the USIC that the Russians are doing it in like late July, early August of 2016, Brennan purportedly called not the head of the GRU, but called the head of the whoever the head of the FSB was. Yeah, right. So I just wanted to make that point following Steve's comments that it seems that even American officials are admitting as much that there was some FSB involvement or overseeing of the election hacking, quote unquote.
Okay. Just one other thing in the 2016 time frame that's probably worth mentioning, or just in context, it may or may not connect to anything, is that in June of 2016, the Lurk banking gang was arrested. And as a fallout from that arrest, a senior official at Kaspersky was arrested. And there were, and the Lurk banking gang were just ordinary criminals that had stolen, tens of millions of dollars, especially from Russian banks, and used a lot, and the sort of hacking malware that they used was, I'm not sure it can be distinguished from the sort of malware that was being used in the DNC hack. It's a bit unclear, but I'll tell the story about Kozlovsky a little later when we get to that chronology. But
Perhaps Steve might have just got. Is he back? Just to fill in some of what Steve was saying, so Konstantin Kozlovsky was one of the lurk hackers, and he was arrested like in July 2016. And on the same line of what happened to Kulin, he was posting on Facebook that he was involved in the DNC hack, and he was working for, he claimed he was working for somebody named Ilya. And then he said later that was Dmitry Dokuchayev, but who is really Ilya? We don't know. It could be Satchkov. Who knows? But on the same line, he was also trying to confess to the DNC hack, even though I think he was arrested before. I think he was arrested in early May or something like that, even before all the emails were hacked. But going back to crap, I just forgot. What Gucci was saying. So back to Sergei Mikhailov, he was also supposedly the source of the of where. I wish I could bring Steve back because he would love the comments on this. Damn it. But anyways, okay. So he was basically in some of the articles they were saying that he was the source of the 12 GRU agents, but he was also the source of the people who were sanctioned on December 29, 2016 that Steve already mentioned. So, and the source and the people that were sanctioned in late 2016 were people like Alexei Belin, who we already talked about, Evgeny Boguchayev, who was this other hacker who apparently Mikhailov was working with Dutch intelligence a lot and Dutch law enforcement to, all right, I'm bringing back Steve. In Dutch law enforcement to arrest Yevgeny. Steve, you back? Yevgeny Boguchayev, and there was a bunch of GRU officers in there as well, like the leaders of the GRU. And people were saying that Mikhailov was the basically snitched on, or was the source for our intelligence agencies to sanction those guys. Steve, did you want to finish? I don't know where you left off.
I lost. I've been off for about 4 minutes.
Okay, cool.
I don't know what happened. So.
Cool. I just went back to that Mikhailov might have been the source for us to sanction the GRU and Alexei Belin and those guys in late 2016.
It could easily have, he could easily have been. And then at what point are they just blaming each other? But it's hard. It really is hard to figure out who's doing what.
Well, I just taking kind of a bigger bird's eye view, you got to try and imagine, all these different subgroups, and a lot of what we do is try and speculate, are they good or bad? Well, that's too simplistic, but you've got, your GRU, which is kind of your military wing. You've got the FSB, you've got cybersecurity companies like Kaspersky or Group IB. You've got actual hack criminals. And now then you throw in the mix, okay, now take a lot of them and combine them. So maybe you have some FSB agents that are actually working, on the side as a criminal, or they're also working on the side for Western intelligence. There's so many different ways that these different groups and individuals cross each other's paths and work together, and somehow we're connected to some of them somehow, whether they're informants for us, whether we have hacked into their communications, and there's even internal conflict among them all. And so as we're talking here tonight, a lot of this information is just going to be overwhelming. It's just a huge data dump. But realizing that it's the same for us too. There's all these connections, and it's not quite clear how they connect and who's good, who's bad, and what even qualifies as good or bad.
But the overarching theme of this is that clearly there's reported conflict between GRU and FSB. So, like, if we're taking FSB's word for it, should we actually be doing that?
Exactly.
And the other thing I was going to say is that Steve mentioned the Kaspersky researcher, whoever that was involved in that lurk snitching to the FSB, and that was Ruslan Stoyanov, who was also arrested for treason in Russia. Just wanted to make that point before I forget it.
Yeah.
Because he might come up later. Who knows?
Yeah. But my story that I got contacted by Kozlovsky, which was an interesting. Should I tell that story?
Yes. That's why I wanted you to be here so you could tell that story about Kozlovsky, amongst other things. But that's a very interesting story.
Did you explain who Kozlovsky was?
I basically said he's the leader of the Alert Group, and he was arrested like in early May or something like that, 2016, something like that.
Oh,
I don't know. I don't remember.
I don't think he wasn't. No, wasn't the leader of the Alert Group. He was a small
Yeah.
guy. But he was.
Okay, gotcha.
He was working, but he was apparently working for Dr. Cheyev, and perhaps under some sort of coercion, perhaps not. But I wrote a blog article in which I'd been looking at the metadata of the work, I've been looking at the metadata that was involved in the spear phishing operations that were supposedly connected to the DNC hack. And in that literature, there was an article on various email addresses that were used to set up a lot of the fake accounts. And there was one of them, John Brugink at mail.co, that was specifically cited in a report by one of the big cybersecurity companies as being an account that had set up 500 or 600 of these fake addresses that were used in the alert banking game, spear phishing. And I noticed one day that address appeared in connection with the DNC, one of the DNC phishing operations, and wrote it up as a blog post. And about 10 days later, I got an email from somebody purporting to be Kozlovsky, who was in jail in Russia, and asking me, sort of saying he'd answer questions. And I, at that point, was not sure what I wanted to ask him or how much I would to be involved in communication with a guy in Russian jail but to prove that I didn't know that he was Kozlovsky. So to prove that he was Kozlovsky, he sent me an email from the Brugink email account. Like, I didn't suggest that to him, but he just, all of a sudden, I got an email from one of the email accounts that had been named in the sort of by the IP security firm as the source of all evil. And so I thought, yeah, this probably is Kozlovsky, and
it's got to be him.
And but I couldn't. But I don't know what I don't know what to say to him. And I think he ended up being sent. But he also seemed, he seemed a bit unhinged as well. So it was hard. He was claiming lots of things about Dr. Cheyev to online and to anybody who would listen. But it really wasn't clear that they were involved in the DNC hack. But by the same token, the roll up of the alert banking gang was being done at exactly the same time as some of these events were taking place. And there were some curiosities in the DNC hack that aren't generally talked about but were relevant. Is that the DNC hackers set up a duplicate of the Democrat the actblue.com. They set up a dummy address called actblues.com, and then they hacked the DCC webpage so that somebody clicking on the contribution page for wanting to donate to the DNC would instead go to their fake webpage. and they battled back and forth for control of the DCC webpage for a day or two. And this is in June, on June 15th, at the same time as they're announcing that the DNC had been hacked, and the idea that Putin's secret hacker or top secret hackers are engaging in trying to hack the the Democrat contributions always seemed a little odd to me.
Yeah. But there's like some, I forget what it is. There's some point of data that there's no way Kozlowski could have been related to Guccifer 2.0 or any of that because he was already arrested. I can't remember which part that was.
I think that's true. Yeah. I don't because yeah, he's not Guccifer 2.0, whatever that
Yeah.
operation is.
Right. Now I'm not really sure where to go from here.
Sorry. I need to take you off track.
Oh no. I wanted you to do that anyways. I was not sure where we were going from there anyways. But John, you had something?
I was going to say on the Guccifer 2.0, don't forget there was the Republican GOP. Some members of the GOP had emails hacked and displayed to DCleaks.org too. And I hate to sound like a broken record about Peter Smith, but there's that December 9th article from from the New York Times, where Peter is the only person quoted in it, but it's the title of the article is "Russian Hackers Acted to Aid Trump in Election," U.S. says, and it basically comes up, starts laying out the case for the GRU. So this kind of predates, but at the same time, we've always been trying to struggle with the idea of why was Peter actually mentioned in here, and also why was his emails hacked too. It was like a series of emails that were hacked and displayed on DC Leaks that help establish him as a GOP operative, because it was to Richard Porter, who was one of the people that put him in touch with Barbara Ladine. So I think that that's an interesting little tidbit out there.
What was it? Was it his account that was hacked, or was it a more general account that was hacked? I didn't.
It appears to be was a more general account from what we could tell. But somehow.
Was it just that it involved a few emails in which he was a party? I mean, I'm trying to remember who the central player was in that. Like there was one account that would have been hacked. I just don't remember offhand which one it was.
Okay, the way it went was there's roughly 200 emails that had been hacked, and they were from just different people across the country. But Peter's specific emails he had sent to an account tied to Illinois GLP. And Richard Porter actually didn't use that account. And Peter had sent those emails, I want to say, at the end of October 2015, when he was sending Richard information on who he thought. And this is interesting because it was based on conversations he had with Charles Johnson, in part, about who was going to succeed John Boehner for Speaker of the House. And it just seems like the timing and everything else, because this entire email, this entire article is linked in one of Peter Strzok's text messages to Lisa Page. He asked her to compare what's in the text of this article to a closed-door hearing that was held a few days beforehand, and the only one I can find was a CIA hearing.
Oh, are you talking about the December 9th Washington Post article?
New York Times article.
December 9th, 2016?
Yes.
Okay, I know. Okay, those. Yeah, I can tell you what those ones were. I mean that ties into an important. It's kind of a hanger-on issue, but the briefing that they're talking about was probably a November 28th or 29th briefing by the CIA to the Senate Intel Committee, in which they assert that they know that the Russians were trying to help Trump get elected, and it's something that had not been claimed in any prior briefing. And immediately following that briefing, the Democrat members of the committee wrote a letter to Obama demanding that he make public the intelligence that was given to them. And Obama, it was like Obama sort of immediately said, "Well, I will investigate this horrifying news," and that's he used that letter from the senators as a pretext to commission the ICA. And then on December 9th, just before the article that you're mentioning, the members, the Senate Democrat, the Senate Intel Committee Democrats leaked to the Washington Post the news that the CIA had told them that the Russians had been trying to elect Trump. At that point, that was not something that anybody knew or expected, and yet within 3 weeks that became universally held opinion amongst the intel agencies. But that December 9th article was the first, that was one of the first articles that was based on leaks from the intel community and the Senate Intel Agency. And then the coordination between the Senate Intel Committee and the CIA continued, because when the ICA was published, concurrently the Senate Intel Committee announced that they were going to hold ongoing hearings into the topic. So that institutionalized Obama's sort of landmine for the incoming administration.
Interesting. So before I forget it, so there's an article basically saying that, I just wanted to put this out there about Sergei Mikhailov. That was basically saying that Sergei Mikhailov might have been a source for actually CrowdStrike. And I know like CrowdStrike big thing was that they're basically a cyber security firm, but they also do intelligence. And the article said that he used a middleman potentially between Mikhailov and Dmitry Alperovich. And I'm wondering if maybe it could be. I know Sachkov knows Alperovich. I'm wondering if it could be Alperovich. I just wanted to mention that because that was one small little detail that I wanted to bring up, or I was going to forget it. But what are you saying, Steve?
No, it's cool.
Yeah. Then I'm not sure precisely where we're going. Eventually, I want to get to the Netishko indictment a little bit. We can comment on it. Ryan, did you want to fill any gaps or anything like that?
Yeah, thank you, Fool. I wanted to pick up a little bit on Mikhailov. I think there's a couple of interesting points to raise from the Bloomberg article that came out last month. And just to kind of finish up on Mikhailov a little bit, or to raise a couple of points at least, this Bloomberg article alleges that Sachkov was a witness against Mikhailov.
Yep.
But it also references that Mikhailov and Sachkov both provided intelligence that basically supported attribution against the GRU for the 2016 DNC hacks. So it's every bit as messy as it seems. I mean, it's so hard to follow because everybody with competing interests also have allegiances, and it's really hard to decipher. And Walkenfire kind of alluded to this earlier. I mean, it's so hard to keep track of all this. Mikhailov has this long-running list of events where he's involved with Pavel, and he's involved with Nikulin.
Yeah, Vrublevsky, yeah.
And he's involved with Nikulin, and then now he's involved with 2016 hacks and Sachkov. So he's kind of at the wrong end of a lot of these stories. And it's kind of to your point earlier about the competing narrative between the GRU and the FSB, and it's really hard to make sense of it. And I guess I'm a little bit troubled that our intelligence agencies, if this report is correct, would view Mikhailov as a credible source, because Mikhailov, he's been convicted of fraud and he's been at the wrong end of a lot of these stories. So if it's true that he was a source that provided support against the GRU, the obvious question is, what is our U.S. intelligence thinking? I mean, how can you give this guy credibility when he's been in so many of these different stories? It's really quite troubling.
Yeah, and that's like sort of the crux of this entire conversation is like, if these guys are the source for these indictments, I don't take them seriously at all. Like, we shouldn't, and that's why a bunch of this stuff should be unredacted and figure out like, where did this intelligence come from? And like you were saying, like, oh, Sachkov was the main witness against Mikhailov, and Sachkov's the main witness against another witness against Kliushin, allegedly. And the other thing is with like these treason trials in Russia, they don't release what they're getting charged with or why. So like, and that's like apparently like what they do in Russia is if you're charged with treason, the details aren't supposed to be released. So we can't believe any of this shit. Like, is Sachkov being charged with treason for the 2014 stuff with Kizlitsyn? Is it with the giving up the 12 GRUs? Is it going against Mikhailov? I don't think that would make any sense. But like, it's like, who do you believe? And then like, if well, to me, it makes sense that Sachkov gave up with this Kliushin indictment. It makes sense that Sachkov would be the source for the GRU stuff because Yermakov's been getting indicted with Kliushin, and Yermakov's one of the 12 GRU dudes. So, but I mean, who would actually know? And that's why I find this entire topic fascinating, because if 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 the Mueller indictment's coming from Russians, and especially in FSB Russians or FSB related Russians, why the hell should we believe any of it? It's basically like the Steele dossier all over again. Ryan, you're going to say something?
I agree 100% with that. It's also why it's so frustrating that Mueller doesn't have IP addresses and email messages. He has a bunch of, and you remember the stuff about Bitcoin addresses, but when you follow it, there are a bunch of Bitcoin addresses that connect to one another, but they don't actually connect directly to GRU. So there's a big step missing that they might well have intelligence on, but they don't put it in the indictment, unlike the other indictments where you feel after reading them pretty confident that the people did what they were charged with.
Right, yeah, because they track through their email addresses, their IP addresses, all this other stuff, identifying it through social media. And then you have things like I said before, like, is there actually any evidence that Yermakov was actually working for the GRU at the time? If he's working for M13 with Kliushin, and the same thing for Sushkin, like he might have been he probably was working for Dokuchayev. That makes sense because there's a lot of detail in that Yahoo indictment. But Sushkin was working for Renaissance Capital, and at the same time, he was indicted by the U.S., but he wasn't arrested for treason in Russia with Dokuchayev and Mikhailov. So what's going on there? Ryan, did you have something to say? I don't know if your mic's open or not.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to kind of pick up with. I mean, I hope you write a book at some point because I'd be fascinated to read it. But you had this full dossier in July 2020, and it references Sachkov. And now, a year and a half later, we're talking about Sachkov because he was just indicted in Russia for treason. And it's just fascinating. And as your source kind of alludes to in this thread, I mean, it alleges that Sachkov is connected to both Christopher Steele and Alperovich. And I mean, given that the Stashkov threat came to fruition, is he right about the connections to Elperovich and Steele? I know Elperovich, he used to cruise the hacker forums. He used to have a lot of those different connections in Ukraine and Russia. So it's really fascinating. And I'd be really interested in your source and what he has to say about that if he ever follows up with you on that.
Yeah, I mean that's the problem with that source is I can't reach him anymore, which I'm wondering if it has to do with Satchkov and what happened to him. But I think Steven Walkafire might know who that source is, and they can probably say that that's a legit source.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely seemed pretty legit. I mean, it was so much new information that he was giving us, but that all seemed to really fit. And like you mentioned, here we are a year and a half later, and it still seems to be right on point.
Did you send this source a Christmas card or anything, fool? Or
I probably should have, but I have no idea how to get in contact with him besides the way I did before. But he's probably, I mean, he could be in a CHS right now and hiding. He was always very hard to get in contact with. So hopefully, I would love to get in contact with you again. My friend, if you're still out there, that's what I called him, hit me back. I don't know where we're going from there. I'm actually going to have to go to the bathroom real fast. Give me a second, though. Somebody else talk. Really? No one?
We were all waiting to see if we could hear. Let's see where to go from here. There's so many different ways to go from here. I mean, if there are any questions or anything that we can help kind of clarify with what we've gone over so far, by all means, raise your hand and I'll see if I can figure out how to.
Well, actually, so I was talking to Adam Carter earlier today, and he was saying, oh, I forget what it is, about Yermakov. I mean, I was going to get into the NetTick show indictment basically a little bit more, but related to Yermakov and stuff. But he was basically saying that it made no sense because Yermakov was researching the PowerShell stuff. Oh, that's what I got confused with related to Kozlovsky. He was, Gucci, you might know it, or Steve, he was like researching the PowerShell stuff like in July or something like that. And that was obviously after the emails were exfiltrated or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah,
comment on the timeline.
Comment on that real quick, and unfortunately, I'm going to have to depart soon. But yeah, the basic idea here is, and there's been a lot of, I guess, sort of coyness, if you will, around this timeline from Muir and those folks. But they allege that the DNC emails were stolen between and around May 25th and June 1st. And they say that during that time period, this Yermakov character who they name very often in the indictments was apparently researching these PowerShell commands, which would have supposedly allowed him to like pack up and exfiltrate these emails en masse. The issue, however, as folks like Forensicator, a guy named like Steam Whisk or something like that, and some others have pointed out in the past, is that a good chunk of those emails were exfiltrated, it appears, on May 23rd, a full 2 days before the Muir guys alleged that the exfiltration began. And then the other like third of those emails were exfiltrated on the 25th. And in an indictment where they do have a lot of very specific dates, even at points mentioning it was exactly at this time when on a Russian-based server, these alleged GRU guys looked up these words that appeared in Guccifer's post in a couple hours later. They say it happened at like 4:19 Moscow time. So they're very specific at points with these dates and times, and yet they seem to fumble the ball, though maybe it's not a fumble because maybe exfiltration of the emails and their alleged GRU exfiltration are actually two different events. So I hope that clarifies what you were getting at.
That's basically what I was getting at. So I was going to get into the potentially Golden Pegasus and the relation between them, FSB, and potentially with the Natitio indictment. Did anybody else have any places they wanted to stop? And I'm probably going to have Walkafire go over that. I don't even know if he wants to talk about that, but I'm going to make him. I don't know if anybody else wants to say anything before that, because this is going to get into potentially was the FSB the actual hackers and not the GRU? And it's just complete competition because FSB wants more funds or whatever they're working for, Western Intel, etc. Anybody else have any stop gaps in between there?
Yeah, I was just wondering if I can ask a question.
Yep.
So I'm a little bit lost on this stuff. This is not like the stuff that
Perfect.
I've kind of been following, but this is really interesting stuff. Does this have anything to do with like the Cozy Bear or like Fancy Bear stuff, or is it completely opposite?
No. Well, yeah, it completely has something which I probably should have said before. So, I mean, obviously, Fancy Bear, they say is the GRU, right? And then Cozy Bear, it's a little bit unclear who the hell those guys are. They say it's either SVR or FSB, which it would make sense. I mean, we haven't heard anything about SVR, but it makes sense if it could be FSB, and that could be Mikhailov's group. But the whole thing about the Cozy Bear was that the AIVD, the Dutch intelligence, had access to Cozy Bear, and they knew who was hacking there, and they knew basically they were hacking into and had access to what the Cozy Bear intelligence had. So it's definitely related. We don't know who Cozy Bear is, who our government, I guess, thinks they are. Our government definitely thinks Fancy Bear is the GRU dudes. But if that intelligence about who Fancy Bear is comes from Stachkov, Mikhailov, etc., we probably shouldn't trust that. I don't know why the hell we would. But but going back to, I might have just lost my train of thought. Damn it. Obviously something about Cozy Bear obviously was in the DNC servers like in September 2015 or earlier or whatever, and that's when the NSA told the FBI to get in contact with DNC because Cozy Bear is in there. So those guys were supposedly in the DNC servers and the DNC network way before Fancy Bear. But anybody else have any comments on that?
Yeah, I'll just comment real quickly. So initially, CrowdStrike had like medium confidence that this is FSB, and to some extent that would align with Kozlovsky's allegations that he was asked by Dokuchev or folks like that to hack into the DNC because I think in some article I read that Kozlovsky claimed he like left like a little calling card, if you will, some like initials or something that would have been identifiable of his, like in the logs of the DNC and I want to say he claimed it was in the fall of 2015, which would align with the Cozy Bear timeline. The Dutch have said that it was the SVR, but it's just not entirely clear with these sort of torrents of leaks who's right on that. One thing that I found interesting about CrowdStrike's assessment of the of Cozy Bear, given how CrowdStrike apparently completely missed the alleged GRU exfiltration of emails, is that CrowdStrike said, like, yeah, we saw that these Cozy Bear guys were very interested in the internal communications and emails that were going around in the DNC. And originally CrowdStrike's like, yeah, and then the Fancy Bear guys just got opposition research. Well, it turns out that supposedly Fancy Bear, aka GRU, got a lot more than just that opposition research, including supposedly thousands of emails that WikiLeaks published. And yet CrowdStrike totally missed that, despite having the insight into Cozy Bear having access to those emails. So I just found that odd.
Awesome.
I think one thing, if I could jump in here, just on the Cozy Bear point, and we have so many questions about exfiltration, it leads one to question. I mean, how do you attribute something to Fancy Bear versus Cozy Bear? Cozy Bear was in there for a long time. Yes, we know that. And Fancy Bear was a little bit more acute to the situation, to the exfiltration and the leak to WikiLeaks. But how do you attribute something to Fancy Bear and not Cozy Bear? It, if we don't have evidence of the exfiltration, how do you do that? It's, I think, one of the questions that we have open.
And that's something that's way over my head, so I have no idea how that could happen. Steve, maybe.
Yeah, I agree with that. Absolutely, that's a really good question.
Like it.
Yeah, I don't think there's, I don't know how they can do it other than sort of Mikhailov told them so.
Right. So that's the whole thing. Is if it's a source.
Unless they, yeah, I mean, going to your, unless they have a bunch of metadata and IP addresses and email messages that they haven't released. But it's mystifying why they haven't released it.
Awesome. ABC, you got anything else?
Yeah, I just had another question. So regarding like how the information actually got out, I guess like the emails. I guess this is tying into WikiLeaks. Um, is there actually like a way, Stephen? Maybe you can answer to look at the metadata and see like what the method of transferring the emails to WikiLeaks was, like how it was done, like if it was a USB or if it was like a drive of some sort. Like, is that possible?
Well, in terms of Bill Binney's, in terms of the arguments, I'm pretty convinced that it was done over the internet. I mean, I'm 99% it was done by the internet, not by a thumb drive. That's not to say that there wasn't a thumb drive used to transfer some of the Guccifer 2 documents at some point. Their forensicator certainly thought so, but the exfiltration metadata on the emails, on the DNC emails, and on the Guccifer 2 documents are all consistent with something being exfiltrated on the internet. The Bill Binney thing is one particular archive of useless documents that were in the Guccifer 2, and they were all done on July 5th. And that particular copying operation may well have been from a thumb drive to something else, but it seems to have been a post-exfiltration operation.
Cool. ABC, anything else?
That's it. Thanks.
Like, for example, there's also, for example, exactly 1 hour time difference between some of the documents in the September 2016 Guccifer archive and the October archive, and Forensicator thinks that a thumb drive was moved from Central Time Zone to Eastern Time Zone, and that accounted, and that the document, the sort of the timestamps ended up being downloaded in one time zone and uploaded in another time zone, and the software that was used wasn't in UTC; it was in relative time, and that's how the 1 hour displacement got in. There's certainly evidence in some of the Guccifer 2 metadata of Eastern Time Zone artifacts that don't seem to be intentional. Like, they seem to have been, they're obscure properties of the data, whereas some of the intentional artifacts are in sort of Russian time zone. So it looks as though they were trying to put it in Russian time zone, but every so but they'd done some of their work in Eastern time zone.
Cool. Ryan, what's up?
I was just going to kind of pose the question. So we know Mikhailov and Satchkov, if this Bloomberg article is to be believed, provided information to U.S. intelligence agencies on the DNC hacks. I mean, I would pose this question just as a discussion point. Do you think they got paid? I mean, that seems like the obvious interpretation, because with a lot of these hackers and a lot of these stories, it's okay, they were arrested, they flipped them, they're providing intelligence so they don't get prosecuted. That doesn't seem to be the case with Satchkov and Mikhailov. So it seems, the question seems to be, what's their incentive to sharing information against their own, GRU? Do you think they got paid by the U.S. intelligence agencies for this information, attributing information to the GRU?
I have no idea, but everybody was like, there's stories around there saying that, oh, Mikhailov's just completely pure and he just wants to fight crime and stuff like that. And he thought that the GRU was getting too much money, so he wanted to do some stuff and so that the FSB would get more funding or something like that, which I have no idea if it's true or not, but no clue. Also, I don't know what he. Yeah, I don't. Maybe. Well, I like Steve was saying that apparently there was a bunch of money found in this apartment, so maybe he was getting paid by the Dutch or us or whoever. Who knows?
I mean, the other possibility in all of this is the publication of email archives seems very much in the tradition of Shaltai Boltai and the sorts of Ukrainian war sort of cyber disputes that were going on at the time, with Cyberberkut publishing documents and Cyber Junta publishing documents on the other side, and all of these presumably Russian hackers and Ukrainian hackers are available for hire. I know that one of my friends was in a dispute with an employer, and the employer hired Chinese hackers to hack his email, and so apparently it's not hugely difficult to find hackers over there to do your work for you. So I mean, it could have been somebody in the Republican Party that sort of hired a bunch of Ukrainian hackers to do it, or Russian hackers. I mean, it wouldn't be that the price of hiring some of these guys to spearfish anybody isn't that much.
That's a good point and a great segue, because I was going to get into Shaltai Boltai after this. I don't know if Walkafire wants to go on a Shaltai Boltai little explanation, potentially, because I know he's super into him.
Yeah, oh yeah. Shaltai Boltai, also known as Humpty Dumpty. It's another one of those confusing hacking groups. Who do they belong to? Are they Ukrainian? Are they Russian? Are they Russian intelligence? Are they criminals? Who knows? Who knows? There's a lot of interesting events that happened with them in 2016 that seem to kind of line up with lots of other interesting events in 2016. But basically, what they would do is hack into oligarchs or powerful individuals' emails, steal their emails, and then basically blackmail them and say, pay us and we'll give you your emails back. If you don't, then we're going to, post them online. And so I'm trying to think. There's the main guy. I think Russia started rounding him up basically in again in late 2016. So I think October or August, September, October, when all this stuff seems to be happening. And there's an interview, I believe, with one of the leaders. He gets kind of tricked into going back into Moscow, and they snag him. I'm trying to remember his name.
Vladimir Anikeyev or something like that.
Yep.
And they were working.
And then there's a couple
they were
articles
in Ukraine.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Stephen.
He was holed up in Ukraine.
He was in Ukraine.
Right. Yeah.
And then in late January, early February of 2017, we get a couple of news stories about one of the co-leaders of Shaltai Boltai had escaped to, I think he was in Estonia at the time, and was planning on asking for asylum there. And he was
Alexander Glazastikov.
There we go. See, I don't know how you keep all these names straight.
I'm a genius.
And so, there's questions about where they getting lots of these emails and turning them over to Western intelligence, where they actually there's lots of stories that were going around that they were actually being run by, again, Dokuchayev, the FSB cyber officer. And so that kind of leads back into, okay, is this rogue FSB unit that's hacking actual, Russian government officials and then blackmailing them and using them to get, whether it's more funds for, FSB, or whether it's just a purely private financial gain. It's hard to say, but they seem to pop up here and there all over the place.
And one of the interesting parts is, like, one of the people they hacked was Timur Prokopenko, and that's where Olga Galkina's name first popped up. And because she was in communication with Timur Prokopenko, who's a big shot in the presidential administration in, like, the internal sector or whatever it is. But when in the footnotes of, like, the Horowitz report, they'll, like, refer to, like, we know that Olga Galkina, I'm just calling her that, they didn't mention her name, was in contact with a person in the presidential administration in whenever time point that was. But that's because they knew from, I don't know if they knew it, but it was definitely released in the Shaltai Boltai stuff that her name was in there. So they probably Brian Otten did some research, and he's like, oh, Galkina was in contact with, or it could be from the 702 or whatever. But we know that Shaltai Boltai already had her emails out with Prokopenko.
Mm-hmm. And you can find a couple really good articles on Shaltai Boltai, the leader. He went by Lewis, like Lewis Carroll, Alice in Wonderland, Humpty Dumpty. And he met with, I'm trying to remember who the reporter was, someone in Thailand, I believe, a year or two before, and kind of gave an exclusive scoop about how they operate and what they do. And that was a really good article. I think there's one or two other ones. I think it might be BuzzFeed that has an article on it.
Yeah, and they started popping up around maybe 2015 or something like that. I forget. But you always wonder, because they're always saying that they might have been hired. Just a sidetrack is that Humpty Dumpty was one of the people that first came out with that the Internet Research Agency was connected to Putin's chef Prigozhin, or whatever his name is. So it's interesting that came up with Mueller as well. And we know that, like, Nunes and all those guys traveled to Estonia like a few times. So it seems like it's likely. And when I went through, like, the HIPSI report, the intelligence, the Russia report by the Republicans in the HIPSI, that all their intelligence related to IRA came from Estonia, and it's interesting. I wonder if they went to Estonia to interview Glazastikov as their source, which we don't know. But I know many people think that that they were hired by oligarchs. Who knows if they're connected to Steele? But one of their members was this female hacker who was always stationed in Kiev, and she's still on the loose apparently. So who knows what's happening there? But Humpty Dumpty, research them, look into them because they're a very interesting crew. But from the Yahoo, I think I said this before. But Dokuchayev was minting those whatever it is for an advisor to a deputy prime minister of Russia, which could be Dvorkovich, who was hacked also or whose emails released by Humpty Dumpty. So who knows? But Steve, were you going to say something? So you popped up purple.
Yeah, no, I wasn't, but Surkov's emails were also prominently hacked.
Right, that's the other one, because they were released by, I think they were hacked by Cyber Berkut and then released by Humpty Dumpty. Is that right?
No, Cyber Berkut's on the other side of that.
Ruhate or
yeah,
no, Cyber Junta.
Cyber Junta, the Ukrainians, and then Atlantic Council got involved. They purported to authenticate the Surkov leaks. So
and just to kind of piggyback on that, a couple interesting data points that may mean nothing, it may mean everything. Surkov may be a familiar name to lots of you. That's Kathleen Kavalak, the State Department official that met with Steele and Tatiana Duran in late September of 2016. She wrote down her notes that Steele had said that Surkov was a source. And later in a deposition, Steele said, that doesn't make sense. I would never have said that. But for some reason, she wrote it down. So it's an interesting question there is was he seeing those emails perhaps? It's hard to say. And then, as Steve mentioned, the Atlantic Council gets involved with reviewing those emails, seeing what they can pull out. Most of the emails from Surkov were from 2014, but they say that they had a lot from 2015 and 2016 that were turned over to law enforcement. Another interesting moment there. And then finally, something came out just a couple months ago. Some notes, I think, released by the Justice Department. It's notes that were taken by Scott Schools during Andrew McCabe's testimony to, I believe it's a Senate committee. And somewhere in those notes, he's talking about this highly classified information, the Renteria memo, as we know, and Debbie Wasserman Schultz's emails, and the stuff that's still all under wraps. But there's a little note in there that says that the Atlantic Council saw this classified information as well, which was real confusing for a while until I made that connection about the Atlantic Council Cyber Lab that was reviewing the Surkov emails, and I wonder if that's all connected there, that McCabe is saying, oh yeah, some of this classified information that came in about Renteria and everything was getting floated around in Surkov's emails. That could be an interesting connection as well.
And that's DFRL Labs, and they did a report on the Surkov leaks, I think. Is that correct?
Correct.
Which McCabe document are you talking about here?
His book, I think.
No, it was a month or so ago.
Oh,
a little longer.
The notes or whatever.
Yeah, and there was a bunch of handwritten notes that it wasn't clear who they were, who was writing it down,
okay. And then, I didn't realize that Atlantic Council was mentioned in that. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's redacted in his transcript, because you can go through his transcript and kind of line it up with the notes and see, that's what the note taking is about. But the transcript doesn't say anything about Atlantic Council, but there is a handwritten note on the same page as the classified information that says Atlantic Council.
They sure don't make it easy, do they?
It's almost like we're being led around by the nose.
Did anybody just I've been in and out, but did anybody mention about the redactions of the Clevenger FOIA?
Say that again.
Did anybody did
Oh,
because while we were talking about the the DNC things
oh no, I was gonna get to that. Are you talking about related to the more recent ones we're talking that we got?
yeah. I mean,
Yeah. So
that's a joke.
yeah. So I was gonna get to that a little bit later, just at the end, because that's very important. But thanks for the reminder. Should we? I want to get to. Maybe we'll just let Mercury ask a question, and we'll get to something else. Mercury.
Thanks for hosting and thanks for having me. And I hope you guys are really good information. And I apologize if this is off topic, but is there any connection between Fiona Hill and Vindman?
Wasn't she his boss? Wait, I would have to think about that. Yeah, wasn't she his boss? Isn't that the connection?
That's my understanding, but she seems to pop up everywhere. That's what I'm looking at. It's just she seems to be like she's here, she's there, and it's just like I just wondered if you guys had any more knowledge. And again, I apologize if I'm off topic.
Oh no, I mean she's related to basically everybody in this, from Steele to Danchenko to Charamella to Vindman to all these people. So I mean, she seems like she's just like a complete Russia hawk. So she's going to side with those guys at any point. That's my view of her. And she was also probably protecting Brookings and Danchenko and Steele in her impeachment hearings, but that's my view of her, that she's a complete Russia hawk. She hates Putin, anything he does. So she's going to side with those guys as much as she can. But that's my view of her.
Yeah, I don't think. We haven't seen much evidence that she was a primary player in any of the shenanigans or the resistance. She was, you know, but she's a bit of a shiny object because it's pretty intriguing to have her name associated with Danchenko and Steele, but other than it being interesting, I don't think it leads anywhere.
That's kind of my view as well. But anything else, Mercury?
No, thank you so much. I really appreciate your guys' knowledge. You guys are fantastic.
Bo show. That's what we're here for. I don't know, like Walk of Fire. I know, like this. So if we wanted to bridge back, like if there's any evidence that that a FSB could potentially be Fancy Bear, I don't know if you got to brush up on this, but do you want to talk about Golden Pegasus at all?
Yeah, I'll talk about it real quick, and just as a quick side note, again, I think even the Steele dossier says stuff, and there were stories going back all the way back to 2016 about the GRU and the FSB, they're fighting, and I brush that off. I think most of us brush it off. Like, is that really that important? I mean, it's just the Russians, intelligence attacking us, and I think, especially with what we've been learning in the last that Bloomberg article recently, and as we start to put more and more of these characters together, I think that it is actually important to kind of start parsing out who's working for whom and who's trying to pin the blame on the other one. So this is all kind of new to me too, trying to figure out GRU versus FSB and get it all straight in my mind. But Golden Pegasus, it's a very, you can barely find any information on him. He's a hacker back in 2016, or before. And he would release, various officials' emails, I believe. And then I think it's Raphael Satter has a little article kind of walking through the chronology. If you just search Google for Golden Pegasus in quotes and then hacker, it should be the first one that pops up. But he mysteriously goes dark for 15 months or something like that, and then pops back up on March 16th, 2017, just kind of angry at the world, angry at the government. I think he's angry at all sorts of people, and he starts releasing some more documents from different journalists that he's hacked and different power players. Only for a few months. There's only a few posts on his website. I think it's Gold PEGAS.
Gold Pegas.
Yeah.
.net.
.net. And it's in that article by Satter. But it's extremely interesting that that's the same day that Igor Sechin was fired from Renaissance Bank, if I'm not mistaken.
And again, this not Igor. You said Sechin, but he might have been meaning Sushkin. But Igor Sushkin was the guy mentioned in the Dokuchayev indictment who was supposedly working for Mikhailov at the FSB. So Igor Sushkin was indicted along with Dokuchayev, and he was working at Renaissance Capital Bank as their top security officer. Then that day he was fired. And then Golden Pegasus pops up, and to me it's like Golden Pegasus or Golden Pegasuschin. But go on from where you're saying.
Let's see. I'm trying to think back to what.
The interesting part is that like they say in the article is that Golden Pegasus hacked the exact same people as Fancy Bear had hacked before, like Humpty Dumpty, that the journalist Humpty Dumpty was always in contact with, and then various individuals that Fancy Bear had hacked before. So it's like, okay, so Fancy Bear and Golden Pegasus are hacking the same people, and Igor Sushkin is potentially Golden Pegasus. Why isn't Fancy Bear the FSB?
Right, exactly.
Is my
it all
question.
Seems to be like he's Golden Pegasus seems to be part of either part of Fancy Bear or access to the same hacked information or ability to hack or something like that as Fancy Bear. And so then when you tie these dates together and kind of the attitude that he has when he resurfaces in March of 2017, it seems to fit with him perfectly, which then, like you're saying, Fool ties straight back into FSB. But it could be Rogue FSB.
Can you walk through the Sushkin chronology again? I mean, I'm like some of this I'm not following, so if I'm not following it, I suspect some others aren't.
Yeah, Fool, I'll let you run with that.
Yeah, so Golden Pegasus was actually hacking, I think, like in 2016 or whatever. Then he hacked a bunch of those individuals.
Can you take Sushkin back to Renaissance Capital?
Oh, okay. So Sushkin was like the chief information officer for Renaissance Capital. Renaissance Capital is run by a Russian oligarch named Mikhail Prokhorov or whatever, and he's like a close ally of Vladislav Surkov. But
didn't Prokhorov? What year are we talking about now?
All throughout this time. I mean,
okay. No, but when did Sushkin get dumped from Renaissance Capital?
Oh, so Sushkin got dumped the day that the Dokuchayev indictment came out.
So, like late 2016.
No, the Dokuchayev. So March 16th, 2017, Dokuchayev indictment's unsealed. That's when they arrested Karim Baratov. Then that day, that's when Igor Sushkin's kicked out of Renaissance Capital. And that's right after that, that's when Golden Pegasus came back. Because Golden Pegasus was active like in 2015, 2016. And then he didn't come back until March 16th, 2017. or the day after the Dokuchaev indictment came out.
Okay, now Prokhorov was the owner of the Brooklyn Nets, as I recall.
Yep, that's right.
And Renaissance Capital is the company that paid Bill Clinton $500,000 for a speech.
That might be correct. I would have to go back into that, but that would be interesting and might be correct. I can't remember because like I heard that name Renaissance Capital all the time. I can't remember what they did, but that could be right.
I mean, I'm 90. I'm 99%.
No, yeah, you're probably right because Prokhorov, I think that's right because he paid them and then he tried to run for president at time as well against Putin because he created his own party. I think the New Right or something like that, or something right. Can't remember.
Okay, so I didn't realize that Sushkin. Okay, I hadn't. So now, and Sushkin is named in one of the recent indictments.
No, he hasn't been in one of the recent ones. The last time we heard from him was in the Dokuchaev indictment, and all those guys basically got charged with treason besides Belin and Mikhailov. But Dokuchaev was, Mikhailov was, but everybody mentioned in that indictment, Mikhailov, Dokuchaev were arrested for treason, and Sushkin was fine, basically.
But he's charged in the U.S.
Charged in the U.S., yeah.
Which case was he charged in?
The Dokuchaev indictment, because he was supposedly more senior than Dokuchaev, but also worked for Mikhailov.
So Sushkin was at the
FSB. Yep, FSB.
Is that before? Is that before or after he was at Renaissance?
During. The story is during. So that he was if you read the Dokuchaev indictment, he was supposedly hacking and getting information from Renaissance Capital. So he was getting like hacking into the emails and getting a lot of it, and basically spying on a bunch of the executives in Renaissance Capital.
But he was ostensibly a member of Renaissance Capital while he was also at the FSB.
Yep.
So kind of like a Facebook executive going to work in the Obama administration,
but at the same time, he was basically a spy at Renaissance Capital. Is the story. So that's why he was fired.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, then Golden Pegasus comes back. He releases some other stuff, and the idea is that Saturn never puts two and two together why he came back, but the idea is that Sushkin was probably Golden Pegasus, and given that Fancy Bear and Golden Pegasus were hacking all the same people, why aren't they the same thing? Running under Mikhailov.
Did Sushkin have a big job at Renaissance Capital?
Well, he was the chief information security officer, chief cyber officer, or whatever it was.
That seems like a little bit too big a fish to get involved in kind of these sort of hacking exposés.
Potentially, but that was his position. I don't know.
But just in terms of profile, it's always nice to, it's over easy to associate people with names of important people that we've heard of. Are we falling into that trap here?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, it could be, but at the same time, all these guys were hacking into the same side, the other side. Mikhailov was clearly playing both sides. I don't know if Igor Sushkin, who knows? It could be that is, but I mean, we're just putting out the idea that Sushkin could potentially Golden Pegasus, but
it's an interesting idea.
Yeah, but it would explain a lot if Fancy Bear. So like, it would explain a lot for the sort of conflict between GRU and FSB. If Sushkin was, it's like it's one of those data points where you have to dig in farther. Like, was Fancy Bear actually FSB if Golden Pegasus was Sushkin? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, and that, yeah, and clearly the attribution to Fancy Bear versus Cozy Bear and who was running it seems very weak, without
Right.
necessarily, while at the same time pointing to Russia in some sense, but just who's doing what to whom is yeah. I mean, I think you're right on sort of that as being a soft one.
Right, and it's like fairly. I mean, it's either that Golden Pegasus and Fancy Bear are the same thing, or one was hacking the other. Who knows? But we just wanted to put that out there for some other people to look into potentially, because I can't get anybody to comment on that section, Satter or whoever else, because he won't comment on who he thinks that Golden Pegasus is. Ryan, were you going to say something?
Fool, I was just going to ask you, do you have a link to Golden Pegasus? Do you have any research or maybe a story you could link to?
Yeah, it's like a Medium article by Sater. Like, it's in one of my things to read, or one of my assignments. Yeah, you should look into it because it's pretty interesting. It's very interesting, actually. But moving on from there, like, Steve, did you want to talk about the documents you're referring to earlier about Mueller?
What
So then, regarding the DNC hack and the NetTick show indictment that were all basically redacted.
Oh, well, I'll just mention it in passing that just about a month ago, or I don't know when they sent it in, but Clevenger sent a FOIA request some time ago for documents in possession of the government pertaining to the DNC hack. And they produced 902 pages of documents and withheld about, I don't know how many others, but about another 1,800 or something like that. And of the 900 pages that were produced, all but about 3 pages of boilerplate were redacted totally. And through the 900 pages, the redactions are explained with codes systematically for all 900 pages. The codes vary slightly differently from paragraph to paragraph, but it's a bureaucratic marvel. I mean, somebody spent a month putting the code names on it, but the net result was they redacted everything, and I mean, literally everything. And so, well, no, actually, not quite everything. There's some dates of emails that are left, but we don't know what's in the emails or who they were sent from or to. And after 5 years, it's frustrating that they should not disclose even these sort of routine documents on the DNC hack. And for anybody that is suspicious about it, there's no better way of fomenting suspicion than withholding things that ought to be produced.
Well, yeah, and I completely agree. And like that entire hearing, one of the Leopold hearings is about like, should they release information regarding like prosecutorial decisions and non what do they call it, non-prosecutorial decisions or whatever, declination decisions or whatever. And like the judges there, like in the appellate courts, are like, yeah, we should release that because everybody wants to know like these things in relation to Trump. Like, it's very newsworthy. It's like, how can you not release all these documents related to the actual intelligence saying that Russia hacked? Because that's the stuff that underlines every single other thing up to that. And it's absolutely absurd. The only thing I can gather from those documents, which is pretty interesting, is that leading up to the NetTick show indictment, is that there's these things called like foreign government requests, or something like that. Walk of Fire. Do you remember reading those? There's something like that. And it seems like everything that's leading up to that February or that July, like 19th or whatever, 2018 indictment was pretty much gathered from foreign governments. And I want to figure out like what those actually mean. Like, is that means like if you're going to indict like a bunch of foreign people and it's from foreign intelligence or from our intelligence, what would those requests look like? It seems like there's all this foreign intelligence or foreign requests and stuff like that leading up to that. So I'd like to know what that is, but I'm not positive what those actually mean if I'm interpreting that right. But Walkfire might be able to comment more on that.
Yeah, so they're called MLAT, MLAT, a Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty. We have them with all sorts of other countries, I think, including Russia and Ukraine and all these. And it's just provides legal process for different countries to say, hey, we need your assistance in our legal, whether it's for prosecuting someone, whether it's for whatever sort of evidence. Trying to think. The very beginning of the Mueller report says how many they sent. I want to say something like 13 MLAT requests. So they sent out those, like you're saying, everything's redacted, so it's hard to tell what they were asking for, what they were getting. But it does look like they're asking for a lot of foreign assistance on different pieces. I'll take a quick side note to Andrew Weissman's book, which is just a horrible read, but some of us have to do what we have to do. But he talks about how Jeannie Rhee really pushed for taking over the investigation of the DNC hack and how we owe this to the American public to show them what happened, and we're going to do it so that it's crystal clear. We're going to do it through criminal process by using MLATs and subpoenas, and we're going to really be super transparent how this all happened. And then look at the indictment we get, and they redact everything else. I mean, it's anything but transparent.
100%. And that's like one of my goals is to like be like, can we just get more out of this? Because there's basically nothing there. Where did it come from? And the whole point of this Spaces right now is just to be like, if this was actually from Sachkov, Mikhailov, whoever, like, no, we can't trust that at all. Get the fuck out of it. That's probably why they're still hiding it. Unbelievable.
Well, certainly the Danchenko precedent shows. I mean, you consider how hard they fought to keep Danchenko secret. It was the only secret that the FBI kept for those 4 years.
Yep.
And how much the once we knew who he was, I mean, it just I mean, people knew the dossier was false, but without Danchenko, you don't know just how false it was.
Exactly. That's why we need, like, I wish we could get an electronic communication about whoever the hell the source was for the Netishko indictment, or the source of, like, I mean, going back to the Smolenkov stuff, if that was even a source, or the source of Brennan's intelligence that Putin basically ordered all this stuff, because it would probably destroy their entire narrative.
Yeah,
guaranteed.
The Brennan secrets. Yeah, the construction of the ICA. This is off topic, and this is a hobby horse of mine, but just just everybody's indulging in that. But yeah, if Brennan's secret information that was used in the ICA remains baffling. When Julia Gerganis briefed, who is a Russian intelligence, the National Intelligence Office for Russia, briefed the House Intel Committee on December 5th, she didn't know the information. So how the hell and then 3 months later, all the intel agencies with high confidence say it was up in the air on December 5th. It's crazy.
Yep. And that's like one of the things Durham was digging into. Why weren't these intelligence agencies sharing the most important piece of intelligence?
Yeah, and going back to, yeah, I mean, and repeating one of your things you said about that it was going to be transparent, and when the Democrat senators in the Senate Intel Committee asked Obama to make this information public, I mean, they said it was really important that it be public, and yet 5 years later, we still don't know what it is.
We don't know any of this stuff, which is nuts. Hopefully Durham actually does release some of this stuff.
Now,
Ryan.
What it meant, now the crazy thing is it may be that what Durham knew was no more than the Papadopoulos story.
That could be the whole thing as well.
And so,
which would be terrible.
And if that's what it was, then yeah, I mean, they fight like crazy not to reveal that.
Oh, guaranteed. Walkenfire said he had to drop off for a bit to go get his dog, so he might channel out. Ryan, were you gonna say something?
I was just going to offer up. I mean, it's such an interesting point of speculation because when you start talking about like Mikhailov and Sachkov, and if they provided information to the U.S. intelligence agencies, the question becomes, what did they provide? And not only what did they provide, but why? And why did the U.S. intelligence agencies need that information? So the U.S. intelligence were relying on CrowdStrike for forensic intelligence, but then they're also gaining input from Mikhailov and Sachkov. And I mean, it's such a, why did they need that information? And what information is, were they given? They have the forensics, but then do they need Sachkov and Mikhailov to come in and say, yeah, it was the GRU? Obviously you have to look at the forensics, but it's really unusual to see that the U.S. intelligence agencies might have relied on this information, as reported in the Bloomberg article.
Well, we don't know we don't know what forensics they had.
Right, yeah. So like, I mean, we know that the FBI got whatever reports they got from CrowdStrike, redacted reports supposedly. And then like you're saying, like if they're relying on Sachkov and Mikhailov for basically human stuff, then that's like very suspect. Like, but it could be that they had some like SIGINT or whatever they had, like maybe the GRU or whoever was using Group IB as like as a IT company or something like that. Maybe they had insight, but who knows? Who knows?
One thing that would be slightly against sort of signals intelligence as being the basis of their attributions is that you recall that in the ICA, Rogers of NSA didn't go along with the high confidence attribution that Comey and Brennan were pushing. So that seems to me a slight indication that it was some sort of human intelligence factoring in rather than signals intelligence.
That's a good point. That's a really good point.
To that point, I think certain agencies, I think Homeland Security, for example, I don't think they gave attribution to Russia until October. So that might kind of support the point that you were making.
Yeah, and that jar or whatever it was. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, I'd have to reread it, but I think certain agencies, they didn't give attribution until much later after, like, the FBI had come out at least.
Well, the jar is another thing that's a travesty. Don't get me. But the December 29th attribution attribution was not an attribution. I mean, it was
Yeah.
nothing. It was just stupid. So, if that's what they were basing things on, then they had nothing.
Pretty much, yeah.
Did you remember that? I mean, I'll tell people the story, but remember the story about the Ukrainian malware that they cited?
Yeah.
Should I tell the story?
Go for it, because X whatever. Go for it.
Yeah, the feature in the December 29th attribution report, which was sort of eagerly awaited and promised to sort of prove the Russian hacking, the key technical feature was something called the Yara rule, which they published. And the report itself was very short and didn't, it contained sort of a zillion IP addresses that were uninformative and not related to the DNC hack. But this Yara rule was front and center. And a company called WordFence looked at it and they said, well, this is a program this is something that we've run into in hackers trying to break into web pages on our WordPress site. And so people kind of raised their eyebrows and sort of, well, what does this have to do with the DNC hack? And then it turned out that and then the people at WordFence were able to figure out the password to this hacking thing, and it turned out to be malware that was for sale on the internet. It was written by a Ukrainian student in Kiev, and somebody even tracked down who the Ukrainian student was in February. And so the feature diagnostic that was in this big government publication was based on openly available Ukrainian malware for hacking into web pages. It had nothing to do, it may have had something to do with the DCC hack where they were trying to set up the fake web page to hack contributions to Act Blue, but other than that, it didn't seem to have anything to do with CrowdStrike. So it was a lot of computer security specialists, who sort of were not necessarily unsympathetic, but they kind of snickered at it.
Yeah, and it's like this, and then eventually that report about the whatever artillery whatever came out to be not true about CrowdStrike. I don't know. I can't remember what the hell.
Right. In December of 2016, they published a report saying that Fancy Bear had hacked Ukrainian artillery and was causing it to miss their target. And somebody figured out that, in fact, that the Ukrainians, whatever it was, it had no connection to reality. It was just foolishness. And also there was some evidence at that time that the malware that was supposedly proprietary to Fancy or diagnostic of Fancy Bear was actually in the possession of Ruhate, the Ukrainian
Cyber Alliance.
Cyber Alliance and so it wasn't nearly as diagnostic as CrowdStrike and others have represented.
Yep. Ryan, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to kind of jumping on that point. There's some interviews out there that you can look up with Al Perovich, and he's on TV in December 2016, and he's saying, well, this hack of the Ukrainian artillery is really similar to what the GRU did to the DNC. I think he even says like the hack or the style is like the same thing. So it's really unusual, and it's kind of symptomatic of Russiagate in its entirety, and it's somebody pounding the table saying, "I know exactly what happened, and here's how it happened, the who, what, where, and why, and how," and it's not true. And the fact that it's inclusive of El Perovich raises a lot of questions, and that I don't know how far down that road we want to go, but Alperovich was doing a lot of interviews between August and December 2016, and he was always pounding the table saying, "I know exactly what happened. It was the Russians, and the Russians hacked the Ukrainian artillery. They're it's the same people. They're doing it," and it's really not true, to Steve's point.
Alperovich probably made close to $1 billion off of this affair.
Well, like it's basically the entire science of attribution is like who's my customer, who they want to attribute it to, and we can make that happen. It seems like that's what it's been.
Well, he got his top CrowdStrike was, I think, going into this one of 20 cybersecurity firms or guys trying to scratch out a living in that fairly competitive market. They got $100 million from Google after they did this attribution, and then became a favored stock, and the stock went up about 100 times or 50. I don't know what, but it's some huge amount. And Alperovich, and Sean Henry both had buckets of stock, and they made out like bandits out of it.
Yeah, and it's been like CrowdStrike's main draw was, like I said before, was that they do cybersecurity plus intelligence, and it'd be interesting if he was disconnected with some Russian intelligence. I mean, I'm sure he was, like obviously, but Russian intelligence officers, potentially Sashkov or whoever, because that was their main oh yeah, we do this.
Probably more closely related to your buddy Joff.
Or Jaffe, yeah. That's another completely separate topic, but guaranteed. Because I mean, like I said before, like in previous things, that there's some people saying that Jaffe was really involved in the attribution scheme as well with CrowdStrike. So maybe that'll pop out sometime as well. They have the same lawyers. Just saying. Just saying. All right. I don't know if any of you guys have any more comments, but I guess like the point of this was like, can we really trust the Netichko Mueller indictment? Like, we can try to go through a timeline and mention all these people that are involved together, and try to be set out like a little bit of a narrative that maybe we shouldn't trust that indictment if it's just from intelligence from either a cybersecurity firm who's trying to make money, who's working with the FSB potentially. It might come from FSB people who have an incentive to throw the GRU under the bus, et cetera, et cetera.
But this, I mean, you mentioned some context to Yermakov that we didn't know at the time of the Mueller indictment, and sort of that just why don't you walk through his connection to Sachkov?
Yeah, so
that's interesting. And then do any of the other people in the are there any of the other names that you've got information that something about that's sort of interesting that we didn't know about before?
Yeah, so basically what sprung this is that Kliushin indictment, which is interesting because he ran this cybersecurity firm M13, who worked with a bunch of Russian law enforcement and intelligence agencies. But underneath Kliushin, who is like the president and CEO or whatever of that firm, founder or whatever. But what was interesting is that Yermakov was working at M13, and that was previously unknown, and it's not. I mean, I'm assuming that's correct, but it was never really known that Yermakov was working for the GRU. Like, we just assumed it because Mueller said it. But he was indicted in this scheme with Kliushin what were they doing, insider trading or something like that. But not until the article from last week, I didn't realize that Klyushin was connected to Sachkov, which is probably obvious given they're both like big Russian cybersecurity companies. But in that article, it said that Sachkov basically turned in Klyushin. So, given Klyushin's relationship to Yermakov, who Yermakov was supposedly the main hacker in the Mueller indictment, and then they say in that article that Sachkov was the source of basically the Mueller indictment. It's like, okay, that's like the connection. That Sachkov could have turned in Yermakov, and now he's turned in Klyushin, given Klyushin left the country, etc. So those are kind of the main connections, and then I mean, obviously the connections the known connections that Klyush or that Sachkov is connected to Mikhailov and Kislitz and all these other guys. So that's kind of the main genesis of why we did this today, because it's very interesting that Sachkov could have turned in Yermakov and he might have been the source of the indictment.
Now, does Yermakov has he been working for M13 all the way through this? And what years are we?
No, well, in the Klyushin indictment, I read it recently, but I can't remember what years we're talking. Ryan, you might know. Do you remember what years we're talking about there? I felt like it's like 2019 or something, the earliest of that indictment, but I'm not positive. But I think when I went through it, like I couldn't tell. So I can't remember the exact years, but from that indictment, I couldn't tell if it was during. It was pretty much not during 2016. They didn't mention 2016, so I couldn't tell if he was working with M13 during the 2016 time period. But it's not dispositive that he was. But I wouldn't think, and there's no obviously no from the Mueller indictment. There's really no evidence that Yermakov was working for GRU in that either. Besides just they tell us that he was, you know.
Right. So you I mean, but you think it's at this point it's a real possibility. He had a fairly big, if he had a fairly big job with Klyushin, he'd probably been working there a few years.
That's what I think. So yeah, I think he was relatively high up, and it's kind of like with Sushchin, like there's definitely evidence that he was working with like that's why I like compare Sushchin to Yermakov. Sushchin was working with Renaissance Capital for a long time, and there's evidence for that. And there's probably evidence, and the evidence for that he was working for the FSB is a little bit stronger as well. But for this Yermakov stuff, I think the earliest part of the Klyushin stuff is like 2019 they go into, or I think it's 2019. But when I was looking into it to see if there's any evidence that there was overlap, I couldn't tell. But there's also no evidence that Yermakov is really working for GRU either. So that's where I ended up.
It'd be funny if they were just kind of like pushing names out like Danchenko, kind of making stuff.
Oh yeah. I mean that's like, yeah, it's like it's basically it's basically the same thing. It's basically very parallel. It parallels Danchenko a lot. But I haven't seen any evidence that it overlaps or anything like that, which I would like to see more, but who knows.
Did there's that actually? Well, the overlap between the potential that Sachkov met Danchenko is also, I think, an amusing story. I don't think it leads anywhere, but I think it's other than an explanation for 86.
Yeah, like what's that?
Do you want me to say that, or is that too off topic?
No, it's perfect because like it's the same thing. Like from the Fool dossier, my source said that like potentially the Steele's sources met with Sachkov people. Did Sachkov meet? Like if you go through like Steele's depositions and his like 302s and stuff, it's like if you go and Danchenko's deposition or his electronic communication, there's this part where he's just like, I wouldn't describe this FSB officer as an FSB operative. I would describe him as like something else. It's like, was he meeting with Sachkov or because he basically says like what I wouldn't describe him as an FSB officer or operative or something like that. I would describe him as like a cyber professional or something like that. I forget what it was, but it would be interesting.
Okay, well, I'll explain. I'll just run through the story because it's pretty neat, and it's sort of
Go for it.
After Danchenko was arrested, there was an effort to try to figure out what the conference was that he was had attended in October. I mean, and actually that was something that a year ago we spent time on, and when we were trying to decode the Danchenko EC, that what was this October conference that he was at, and we had a lot of theories on it, and when we learned that this October conference featured again in the mention with Dolan and so on, it became more interesting. One of our Twitter corner found a June tweet from K Global where Dolan was working at a conference, and this was on the same day as Danchenko was there, and we know that. And in the
this was Mishi or something, one of those Twitter accounts, Mishi
Mishi,
yep.
Really
YPO.
Yeah, so in the background there was a logo of a company called Hush Blackwell. So Mishi looked that up and found out that Hush Blackwell. I'm trying to remember the story. Anyway, a guy named Stephen Kupka of Hush Blackwell was working with Dolan on the Young Presidents. Oh, I know what it was. He found an article in a Russian language in Sputnik about a October conference in which Stephen Kupka of Hush Blackwell was interviewed about the conference entitled Inside the Kremlin, which was being sponsored by the Young Presidents organization, YPO. And so it became very instantly clear that the YPO conference was the conference that Danchenko had been working as a facilitator on, and also that would have been in June the YPO people had done a warm-up conference at the Ritz-Carlton where they were checking things out, and one of the stories in the Danchenko indictment, which nobody made much of at the time, but I think it's really interesting, is that it was Dolan and Kupka who had a tour of the Ritz-Carlton with the hotel management and saw the presidential suite that later became notorious. And Danchenko had actually never talked to any of these hotel managers, but presumably Dolan and Kupka told them about their tour, and then Danchenko just weaved that into a crazy story. But it was not. But he had not even met with the people that were supposedly the source of the story, and then they just wound that up into intel porn. Now, where this comes into Sachkov is that Sachkov was a very keen member of the YPO. And so there's not direct proof that he was at the June YPO conference in Moscow, but he was at pretty much every other YPO event and was and so I think it about 99% certain that Group IB would have made some sort of presentation at the Young Presidents Conference in Moscow at the Ritz-Carlton in June, and that Danchenko appropriated some of this stuff, which was no more than conference tittle-tattle, into his Report 86, where Group IB ideas come into play, and that ties in somewhat to the mention of Group IB in the sort of Fool dossier, but I don't like. I think we'd be making a mistake if we tried to attribute anything real in Danchenko's comments about in Report 86.
Yep, I agree. And like I was saying, in his electronic communication, he says something about like I met with somebody who's like related to the FSB, but he's not an FSB operative in that October time point, which could be Sachkov.
Oh, I see that. Yeah, that'd be interesting. That could be
right. Yeah, because like you're saying in the Fool dossier, you see like the YPO with Sachkov, and then in his electronic communication, he meets with somebody. Like in the dossier, they say like, "Oh, like I met something with a FSB officer," and Steele talks about it later, and then Danchenko is like, "It's not an FSB officer. It's like that's wrong. It's like some cyber operative or something like that." But who knows?
Would Danchenko be in any? Would Sachkov's, like would the association with the FSB between Sachkov that we're postulating, would that be something that would be known in a garden variety play? People like Dolan or Danchenko.
Wait, you just cut out there, Steve. What'd you say?
Oh, is it reasonable to, like, even if we think that it's now that there's association between Sachkov and FSB, would that be known to anybody?
I'm not sure about that. I don't know. I can't comment on that. I would have to think about it. Not sure. I guess before we go to just questions or anything like that or comments, do any of you guys want to say anything else? Any of the hosts or speakers or anything?
No, I don't think so. I think it's interesting to note that Group IB had at least one office in New York that closed in August 2016, but that's something I'm still looking into a little bit. I'm curious if Sachkov ever visited the United States. Curious about Danchenko and his visit to New York, but
that would be interesting.
It's sort of and it's sort of the the push and pull that we experience on Russiagate, right? We want to attribute things that make sense to us, but without evidence, we can't really say anything for certain. It's interesting, but until we know, we can't really speculate on it too much.
Very wary of attempts to try to find some sort of truth in something that Danchenko wrote. Like if you sort of think of some connection, I think it's a bit of a booby trap. That there's not much point trying to find a connection. Some of these things are more just interesting, but it's no more real than something he read in the newspaper.
Yeah, and that's certainly true, and it you can kind of see it on both sides. You can see where he might have met with somebody, like in the instance of Dolan giving him information, and then he just makes up whatever, and you kind of want to follow that trend and say, well, if he had this allegation, he must have met and spoke to somebody, but we don't know. I mean, obviously, that's what we would like to do, but he could have just made up whatever, or Steele could have embellished it, and it's really hard to parse out which is which.
Well, I think in the Dolan things, we can, some of it we can sort of watch the progress quite clearly. That Dolan told them, some diplomats going back to Russia, and then Danchenko makes a huge song and dance about it. So the only things interesting in it are fake.
Yep. All right, cool. I guess with that, I'm really happy with how this went, and I thought we put some good information out there. We should probably open it up to questions or comments or anything like that, unless you guys got anything else. Steve, your mic's getting a little bit robotic, by the way. I don't know if you can
I'm
do anything about it.
not.
All right, cool. I mean, I can understand you completely, but it's kind of a little bit going in and out. Any questions? I saw somebody requested. Hello? Anyone? I know Walkafire said he was going to come back, but if we don't got any questions or comments, that we can just end it, and this can be our narrative, and be pretty cool. Just have this be a piece of history of our hypotheses.
Okay.
Cody, anything? I know you like this stuff.
Somebody might have a question.
Anybody? Oh, wait. All right, we got somebody. We got Brandon farted. Brandon farted?
That's me. I appreciate what you guys do. You put a lot of time into this. It would be kind of cool if you guys just kind of started a weekly podcast of some kind that people can go back to at later points to re-listen to some of the stuff, because I'm not writing notes down, and it'd be cool to be able to just re-reference some of these names that, frankly, are hard to spell and hard to remember.
Yeah, well, that's why I recorded this, and I know Ryan's been trying to have like sort of a weekly podcast thing, so I know he's been trying to do that every Thursday, so I think we could probably do that.
Great. I'll follow Ryan as well and try to keep up.
Yeah. By the way, follow Ryan, the co-host. He's been trying to get some of these conversations going weekly, so that'd be pretty awesome. Especially now with these spaces that are recorded. So I don't know exactly what I can do with them. I'm hoping I can just leave them up and on Twitter, and that you can just listen to them anytime on Twitter, but we'll see how it works. But I'm hoping that's what happens. That's my goal with this. If Ryan wants to do them every week, that'd be awesome. Because I'd rather just sit in the background and do whatever and comment. But maybe.
Well, it's
who knows?
appreciated. I follow you guys.
Oh yeah.
Enjoy it. Thanks.
For sure. I enjoy it too.
I'll be out now.
Yeah. So follow Ryan, and he might get these going every single week. All right. Let's do TDS suffer first, and then we'll go to you, Mercury. TDS got in first.
Yeah, so I joined pretty late, so sorry if I'm somewhat asking you to repeat yourselves, but could you give me like the quick summary of, do the researchers here think it was Russia that hacked the DNC, or is that something that's unknown but you're skeptical? I know Felix Sater the other night, his opinion was, yeah, it was Russia. I was curious what you.
Well, like I said in the beginning, that wasn't really the point of this one. It was basically the point of trying to figure out if we should believe the intelligence behind Mueller's indictment more than did Russia do it, because we know, we think that probably one of the intelligence agency in Russia might have hacked the DNC, right? But like Mueller even says, there's no evidence that they passed it on to Julian Assange, etc. This is this whole entire, TDS, you should listen to this whole thing because it's pretty good. But the whole thing is about where did Mueller get his intelligence to pin Russia down for the entire DNC hack being released through WikiLeaks, basically. So that was the point of this, and to try to dig into all these connections between Russian intelligence operatives and Russian cybersecurity firms and other things like that. But obviously you're here the other night. We were talking about that, but I don't think we were trying to, in this space, we weren't really trying to say whether or not that was Russia hacked the DNC. We were just trying to talk about the intelligence backing Mueller's claims and things like that. Anything else?
No, that's all I had for now. Thanks.
Cool. Mercury?
Again, I really want to thank all of you, all of the hosts, co-hosts, contributors. You guys are fantastic. Again, bear with a novice, but I just wondered, Lee Smith was on this. Have you guys had an interaction with him? Because you seem to be way in deeper than he is. Any thoughts on that? And I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus.
Oh yeah, I mean, like we talked to Lee a lot, and as about being deeper, maybe, but Lee has more sources than us, so I guarantee he's deeper. Like we have to do it based on basically OSINT and documents that are available to us. Lee has better sources than us for sure. I don't know if any of you other guys want to comment on that. Because I mean, like if you read his book, he basically has a source that was saying that some of the Brennan stuff, some of his intelligence was basically just Papadopoulos and things like that, which would be ridiculous.
Yeah,
I don't know if Steve, you want to comment on that?
there's Lee's solid, but there's a lot of material. There's a lot of material that I think sort of our group sort of collectively has a better grasp on many details. There's only so much any one person can do, and some of Lee's interpretations. I mean, we argue about them. And they're certainly not locked. I mean, I certainly wouldn't. If he says something, I don't assume it's right. But out of any reporter, he's got the closest view to our collective view on what happened, I would say.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
In terms of in terms of what the secret sauce was, he thinks it was. Yeah, he didn't think it was the Papadopoulos. He thinks it was the Steele dossier, but that's based on.
Oh right, yeah.
Oh
yeah, I'm confused.
Nunes's source, Nunes, and Nunes. Nunes doesn't. At the end of the day, I DM'd a lot with Lee on this. I don't think Nunes, at the end of the day, never got a satisfactory explanation of what the secret information was. It seems to have been a stitch job between the Senate Intel Committee and the CIA and Brennan. So, now Nunes thinks that Brennan didn't have anything more than the Steele dossier. I'm inclined to think that I'm inclined to take Brennan at his word on this. I mean, that seems awfully gullible, but Brennan says that it wasn't the Steele dossier, but I wonder whether it was nothing more than Papadopoulos. Some people, Smolenkov has been suggested in it. Svetlana thinks that Smolenkov was just a stalking horse to the fake thing. But actually, that whole ICA would be, the origins of the ICA is something that would be worth a long spaces on by itself.
Yeah, and like alluding to what Steve just said, that like in Lee's book, he basically says that the secret sauce, whatever Brennan was attributing, that Putin directed, and that it was that it was Russia, whatever, in the collusion sort of narrative, that in that line in the ICA, they basically cited the appendix, the Appendix A or whatever, which was the Steele dossier, basically, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's that. I'd have to look back on it. I don't know that. well, anyway, the dossier was certainly cited somewhere in it, and then actually in terms of redactions, the Senate Intel Committee report has an entire section on this, the sort of this attribution, this one important point, and it was entirely redacted. So we're no further ahead. But that's a story for another day.
For sure. Any other questions? Anybody out there?
No.
All right, cool. Going once, going twice.
So,
see you later. Hello? Oh, Steve just blanked out. All right, cool. Well, if nobody else has any more questions, then we can end it now. I feel like it was very constructive, and like Brandon Farden was saying, if you want to go back and listen to this to get the names and whatever and get some ideas about this, that'd be cool. And I'm ready to get out of here unless, Ryan, you got anything?
No, I don't think so. I just want to say thanks, Fool, for hosting this. Just being able to hear your perspective as somebody who's been looking at this for years is just really valuable, and I appreciate it.
For sure. And thanks for co-hosting. And yeah, it's fun. I like to put all this stuff in one big narrative so people can just go back and listen. So, and also so I never have to be like go and listen to this thing. I just want it on one thing, and then people can go listen to this, and then I never have to do it again. And it's awesome. And hopefully, like with this recording, that like I can just post it and somebody can go listen to it. I don't know how it works, but I hope that's how it works.
I think it stays up for 2 weeks. That's just, again, I have no facts, but I think it's 2 weeks.
Okay, cool. Then I can get I know with these Spaces things, the speaker can get a copy, so then I can post it or give it. Cody's probably recording it. Can you put a hand up if you're recording it, Cody? Or make some type of emoji thing. I don't know how it works. Okay, cool. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. I had a great time. I felt like there's a lot of good knowledge getting dropped in here. I see Walk of Fire. Thanks for hosting. I know he's going to pick up his pupper. And Ryan, definitely thanks for co-hosting. And like Brandon Fartage said, we should probably get one of those weekly things. Looks like Cody said he was recording, hopefully. So cool. Yeah, if we get one of these weekly things going, that'd be pretty cool. Would love to do it. All right, guys. Thank you. We will see you next week, maybe then, and get your Russian names down. And I'll see you later. Thanks a bunch. See you, Ryan.
Thanks, Fool. See you later.
Adios, guys. See you next time. Bye.